In this video, we're gonna take a look at the lighting breakdown for this dinner scene that I shot. I hopped on Shot Deck to find a reference image for me to base my lighting upon. And I found this reference frame from the movie Decision to Leave. I really liked how natural the lighting looked, and I thought it was something that I could achieve with the lighting that we had access to. With the reference frame selected, I then hopped into Satellite 3D to build the scene in a 3D environment. This allowed me to light the scene using lights that we had available in a virtual environment so that I was able to iron any of the kinks out before even stepping on set, saving us a bunch of time on the day of the shoot. We started by lighting the wide shot, and the reason for this is that the wide shot is generally the hardest shot to light because you're seeing a lot of the location. Once you've got your lights set for the wide shot, it makes it really easy to move around and grab all of the close-ups and other inserts without actually having to move any lights. So to begin, we set up the key light, which was an Aperture 300X with a Light Dome Mini. And this was boomed in with a C stand. We rotated the light so that it was at about a 45-degree angle towards the talent. And that's creating this really nice key on the talent's face with a little bit of a Rembrandt. And it's also lighting up the table as well as this hair light here and on the shoulders as well, which is really nice. And for the next light that we put in, we placed a infinity bar in the background here. And this light was to replicate the under cabinet lighting that you can see in the Decision to Leave frame. I would have loved to have this light a little bit further left into frame to about here, I think. But the way that we had it rigged up didn't allow us to get the light any further left into frame without the light stand being in shot and the light being a bit further away from the cabinet. So this was as far as we could actually get the light in the end. The infinity bar was set to, I think, 3200 Kelvin, and I think it was at probably 10 to 15% intensity. The next light I had was a 4-foot pavo tube. And this light was at minimums. I think it was at probably like 5% and at 3200 Kelvin. And this was pointed into the roof just to give a little bit of ambience to this area here, so that it didn't fall into the shadow. And the last light was a 2-foot pavo tube. So 2 foot. And that was set to 3200 Kelvin at, I think, 15%. And this was pointed into the roof, so that was going into the roof, just to give this warm little wash in that room there. And here's a behind the scenes image of this lighting setup. As you can see, here's the Aperture 300X with the Light Dome Mini and diffusion, boomed over the top of the talent with a C stand, and the Aperture infinity bar is just here, and you can't actually see the other two lights because they're hidden out of view, but you can just see the illumination from that Pavo Tube 15C into the roof just there, and there's a little bit of a tungsten illumination from the Pavo Tube that's hidden behind this wall, bounced into the roof. Once we'd finished capturing the wide shots, I then moved in for the close-ups, and I was really happy with the way that the lighting was looking, so I didn't actually make any changes to the lights in terms of intensity or placements. The only thing that I did change was the focal length of the lens, moving from a 28mm to a 50mm. So to begin the grade, I first used the Dehancer Film Emulation plugin at the end of my node tree, as you can see here. So if I turn that on, this is what it's doing. The profile that I ended up using was the Kodak Vision 3 50D. And then I used the Kodak Enduro glossy paper as the print profile, and I enabled the analog range limiter on that one. I added a little bit of film grain, which is the 35mm ISO 50 profile, and I dialed that way down so that it wasn't too hectic. I then turned off the halation and I dialed back the bloom. All of the other settings I left as they were. In the first node, this is where I did all of my exposure adjustments for the wide scene. So if I enable that, you'll just notice that I brought down the exposure using the HDR wheels, as you can see here. I have set the HDR wheels to the color space of my camera, which was Sony S Gamut, and the gamma, which was S-Log2. And in the middle node is where I did any of the color work. And for this instance, it was just a bit of a color boost. I cooled up the image quite a bit and added a bit of magenta back into the image, which you can see if I turn it off and then on again. It just balances out the image a little bit more. In this next shot, I first began by doing an exposure adjustment, and I brought up the levels of the exposure because it was a little bit dark. And then I did a color balance just to make the colors look a little bit more neutral across the image. In this close-up shot, I wanted to bring down the exposure of our talent Harley's face. So I first did a power window and I just brought down the exposure there. And in this next node here, I did a color balance, and I just added a little bit of a color boost just to bring back the saturation in the face a little bit. In this third shot, I basically just did a color balance just to make things look a little bit neutral in terms of color across this image. In this second last shot, I did some exposure work just to bring down the exposure of the image, as well as a bit of a white balance just to make the colors look a little bit more neutral. In terms of the color grade as a whole, I didn't want to go too crazy in terms of stylization. I wanted to keep the look quite neutral with only some minor warmth added and a little bit of saturation added once I had put the film emulation on. I did go a little bit darker on the gray than I'm typically used to with a lot of the other footage that I shoot, just to experiment with a more contrasty look. This was a really fun scene to try and recreate. And although it's not a one-to-one in terms of the reference image, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. And my goal wasn't to recreate this scene verbatim from the reference image. I wanted to use the reference image just to give me some inspiration in the lighting setup. If you enjoyed this lighting breakdown video, leave me a comment in the comment section below. I really enjoyed making this video, and I would love to do more like them in the future. If you've made it to this part of the video, you might like to check these videos out here. And whilst you're at it, hit the like button and subscribe to get notified of future videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, don't forget to hit record. If you like this lighting breaking down,